Okay, then I will share my entire screen. So once again, I welcome you all to today's session. So in our last session, if you were opportuned to attend, we delved iterate into what functions are. So and we also checked data structure in Python. So particularly, we were able to deep dive into lists as a data structure. So during that session, so we understand what list is. We also checked the list syntax. So we also understand how slicing and indexing work with strings and lists. So and also important thing to mention that we covered then was also understanding what methods are for list and how to use this method. So we exercised different methods in list, how to sort, how to list, how to append, how to remove an item from list, and also how to iterate over list. So if you missed that session, I would recommend you check the recording. So it's available. I'll also be sharing this after this session. So now, without further ado, so as highlighted in our theme of discourse for today, so here are the topics you will be looking into. Just a moment, please. So today we'll be continuing or kicking off with data structure. So, but now we'll be starting with tuples, right? So since we've checked lists, we're starting with tuples. From then, we would extend into sets. So we would also check dictionaries. So what are tuples, right? So tuples basically are just a data structure. So what are data structure in programming at large or in Python particularly? So just allow us to structure our data. So, basically when we work most times, so we work with information, we work with data. So how do we collect this data? How do we store this data, right? So to make our work or our program structured and organized. So this is the essential or the key factor for these data structures. So we now have them in variants. So we have the likes of lists, which we have checked. So we also have tuples. So while I was discussing lists, it's important to re-emphasize that. So list is like and it's an ordered and a mutable data structure. So when we say mutable in programming or in Python in particular. So what we mean basically is that data structure can be modified. That is the data we are working with can be modified. So how do I mean? If for instance, so let's say we have something, so I'll still be citing list very quickly, but I'll not be going in depth. So let's say we have my list. So this is the syntax for list. So we define a variable, right? Then in that variable, 1 second, let me bring up my keyboard. So in that variable, we give it an assignment operator. So to now define list, so we use what we know as the square brackets, right? So whenever Python sees this square bracket, it understands that we are working with list. So in this list, we can have arrays of items. So we can say maybe we are having a list of grocery items. So we can say this is our let's say this is our um potato. So just for instance, oh sorry. So we can say this is our potato, right? So also, let's say we have another thing, is our tomato. So this also our let's say veggies. So and the likes. So you can add as much item as you want, right? Depending on the program objective. So now in this scope, when we now say a list is mutable, so what it means is I can now say that in this list, if I print my list, right? So this is how to print your list. So if you say this and you run your program, so if you check, we have our items should be printed here. So can we see it here? So we have potato, we have tomato, and we have veggies, right? So now let's now say in my shopping cart. So I now remembered I have not included, let's say, yam. Let's say I have not included yam in my shopping cart. So I now want to add yam to my item. So list allow us to add additional item. So by using what we know as one of the methods of list. So in this case, you can say list.append, then it takes an argument. I've explained what argument is extensively in our last section. So if you still have um if you still need more clarification on that, please refer to our previous session, right? So we say list my list dot append, right? So now let's now check what our list is now. So let's now print our list again. So my list, right? So let's see what we now have now. So can we see now we have yam, right? So we now have yam added in our what list database, right? So this is one of the importance or usefulness or use cases for lists. However, for tuples, which we'll be starting with today, tuple, it's also an ordered data structure. So when we say data structure is ordered, what we mean is it prints it out as it is being listed while we are chopping or while we are adding our items. So how do I, if you check here, we have potato. So here where we have our output, we also have potato, right? So we have tomato, we have tomato. So in that order which we have entered it. So that is what make them ordered data structure. Now mutable. Mutable is like you can add, you can remove, you can manipulate data in it, you can like do other things you want to do in it. So list allow that. However, for tuples, tuples is known to be immutable data structure. So what are immutable data structure? Immutable data structure is data structure that does not give room for modification. Once it is being defined, it's defined. You can't add item to them. You can remove item to them. You can't use most of those extensive list attributes or list method while working with tuples. So for instance, let's now say so we are going to comment this out. So I just needed this as, let's comment this out. So now we are going to start with, let's say we are having a list of um let's say a list of shopping. So we want to go for a shopping. So you have a list of shopping. In this list of shopping, I would give it an assignment operator, right? So after this, now the syntax for list is, I said for tuples rather is what we use, what we know as what parentheses, right? So parentheses signifies our Python interpreter that we are working with tuples, right? And it treats it as such. So unlike list that we use the square bracket. So this differentiates tuples from list. Now let's now add item to this our tuple list very quickly. So let's say we have milk, right? So in our shopping list, we have milk, we have um let's say we have honey, right? So we also have what else? Let's say we also have water, right? We have water. So we have shirts, right? So let's assume this is our what shopping list. So now get to check what we've been able to add so far. So you can call the print function to show us what our shopping is, right? So when we check this, so we have it here. Look at the bottom of the terminal. So the terminal has what outputs what our shopping list is. So here we have milk, honey, water, and shit. Now this would make sense now. I mentioned earlier that for tuples, you can't really like manipulate or modify your data structure, right? So let's now assume that in this case, I now want to add trouser or shoes into my list, into my tuple, right? Into into my data. So let's see what happens, right? So in this case, I will now say shopping. So I will say shopping dots. So don't forget the append. I emphasized so much on this method and others in our last session. So what append does is basically it allows us to add items to our list or to our database. So, but basically, what it does essentially, it adds that item to the end of the list. So now let's see what happens if you want to use this method for tuples, which doesn't support item modification and the likes. So now let's say we now want to add shoes here now. So we now say we are adding shoes to our item. So now let's print and let's see what happens. What does interpreter say? So can we see what interpreter says? So it's telling us that attribute error, tuple objects has no attributes append, right? So what does this mean? So basically, the use case, one thing we should bear in mind is anytime you want to use a data structure, that is, you don't want to tamper with your data or with item you are trying to collect. So in that case, you refer to tuples. Again, if you are working with a program that you don't want to alter any information you have in it, right? So you use tuples. However, if it is a database or a data collection that you will need to manipulate, to add, to remove, to adjust, to change indexes, so in that case, list is your go-to, right? So let's also try another method with this tuple so that let's confirm maybe it is only append that it does not support. So in this case, I also introduced insert to us in our last session. And if you can still recall, I explained extensively that insert takes two arguments, right? So the first argument is why the difference between insert and append is append add a new item at the end of the list. Insert allows you to state the index position that you want to add that item. So that makes it to take two arguments. So the first one is you state the position, so which we want to add. I also mentioned what indexing is. So for the first position, it starts with index 0. Now let's assume we want to add these shoes to our index 0 to be our first item on the list. So now I have stated 0, and the next argument it takes is what? The item you are trying to add. So in this case, I say shoe, right? So now let's see what happens if I run it. We still get the same error. Tuple object has no attribute insert. So essentially, tuple does not permit item modification and the likes. So that is that on tuples. So if there's any question on tuple, please let me know before we proceed. So for those that are just joining, thank you all for joining. So I am trying to be as fast as possible because I'm just using a spare backup I have to run my system. So, and I don't know how far this would take us. So, if there is any question, please let me know before we proceed. So, welcome, goodness. Thank you for joining Damilola, Rhoda, and those that are just joining. So I welcome you all. So thank you for joining. So that is that on tuples. So if we are all good with tuples, please let's react or let's just drop a message in the chat so that we can move ahead, please. So you can send a reaction or drop a message in the chat so I can know we are all good before we proceed. Let's do that very quickly, please. If you have any question, you can unmute and speak. Let's react, guys. Okay, so let me check this. Okay, so someone is asking for a refresh. So I will be very fast. So with this, so for those that are just joining, right? So we kickstarted this with data structure. So and I mentioned earlier that in our last session we've discussed what data structure is, basically the concepts, the conceptual framework, the rationale, the logic, and we also discussed logic. Functions. So all these are essential. They are building blocks for us to understand what data structure is as a whole, right? So, and in our last session, I explained everything about function, how to define a function, the conventions for defining functions, right? So, and we now also, we're able to check data structure in our last session. So in that data structure, we explain what data structure is. So I explain why we need data structure. What are data structure? How do we know a particular data structure we are supposed to use? So, and that's allowed us to begin our data structure um, discourse with lists. So in that session, I explained list iterate. So how to add item to list, the list syntax. So in that list syntax, I mentioned that for you to define a list and for Python to recognize it as list, so you use what we know as the square bracket. So when you define your variable, so in this case, so if you can see where my cursor is, so I have commented this. So we have my list and we have a square bracket. So if you compare it to where we have here, so this one is parentheses. So Python now understand that when it sees parentheses, it is tuples. When it sees lists, when it sees square bracket, it's a list. So the difference between them is they're almost the same thing, right? We use them to collect information, to collect data from users, right? Depending on the program we are working with. However, for list, right? List allows us to manipulate data, right? List allows us to manipulate our data. When you talked about adding another item in list syntax, what happens if you insert instead of append? Okay, so I'm going to answer that in a second, Maxwell. So now list allows us to manipulate our data. So you can add, you can remove, you can do anything you like with list, right? So now for you to understand or appreciate which one to use, you know, they're almost the same thing, but for you to know which one to use, anytime you want to work with a data, and you don't want to alter the information or the data you've collected, so you use tuples. Because as we have seen now, as I have demonstrated, tuple will not allow you to add anything, to not allow you to remove anything. So if you use any of those methods we used while we were checking lists, it will throw an error. So you get an attribute error telling you tuple object has no attribute insert. So that is the difference basically. But if you want to work with an item that is, you want to allow for changes, for modification, for updates and the likes of your data. So the best bet for you in that case or in that scenario is lists, right? So I think I've been able to bring you up to speed, wisdom. So also you can also refer to recording of this session after the after the session, right? So you can also refresh on what we've checked before you join. So for Maxwell, your question basically is the difference between append and insert is just that append would add the new item at the end of the list. So let me demonstrate that. So that would take us back to list. I'm trying to be very conscious of time. Okay, so for list, let's now say, so I want to uncomment all this again. So let's say this is our list, right? So we have defined a list. So you have a list of potato, tomato, and veggies, right? So when we printed our list, let's see what we have. So let me first comment this one out first. I'm commenting this out. So now let's print our list. So if you check the terminal, so at the bottom, you have tomato, potato, and veggies. So it's coming in the order at which we have added them while defining the list. So that is what makes it ordered data structure. So now in this case, so I now remember that, oh, I also needed to buy yam, but I've not added yam to my cart, right? So you now come again. So you come to your list. So there's a method which is append. So append will now allow you to add new item. But when you just define item, it takes one argument. So you now add that new item you want to add. So in this case, yam, right? So now let's print. Let's see where it is positioned. Let's see where yam is positioned in our list now when we print it. So when we print now, if you can see at the bottom, we now have yam, but at the what? At the extreme end. So it added to the last. Now the difference between append and insert is with insert. So for you to understand inserts, for you to appreciate insert, you need to understand indexing in list or in string, indexing in string, right? And slicing for you to understand this, because insert takes two arguments. The first argument, you want to tell it the position you want it to be. And I mentioned that positioning in string is, it starts with 0. So which means the first position takes number 0, right? So and so on and so forth. So now let's say in this case, so we want it to come after potato. So what do we identify as our index? we identify it as 1 because index will be, and our list index is in position 0. So I want yam to come after potato. So I will now say 1. So I've also explained what argument is and parameter. So you can refer to our previous session so that you can understand all of these things. So now I have identified position as 1, and I also identify yam. So now let's run it. Let's see where it's index yam. Can you see? So yam comes after what? Potato. Now let's change this position of yam to 0, and let's see what happens. So what happens? So it comes before potato and makes it the first item on the list. So we have arrays of methods that you can use to manipulate list. So let's say I want to remove anything from this list now. So it is something you can also use what we know as the remove method, right? So if you say remove, right? So let's see what happens. Okay, I've not stated what I want to remove. Let's say I want to remove yam. So let's see what happens if we print. My list dots remove. Oh, let's use pop. Let's use pop. So if I say pop, right? So to pop out the item. So let's say in this case, I want to pop out. Oops. The reason we were getting this error, who can guess? The reason is because I added in this list, in my first list, there is no yam in it. Can you see? There is no yam in my first list, in my original list. We only have potato, tomato, and veggies, and I'm trying to remove yam. That was why we are getting this error. Yam is not in list. Can you see? It's stating that it is not what in list. So that is why we are getting that error. So now let's try and remove something that we have in the list. So let's say, for instance, potato. So let's see what we have now. What is it saying? My list.pop. Type error, string object cannot be interpreted as an integer. Okay, one moment, please. Hope it has not uncommented something at the top. Okay, so let's first print our list. So this is our list, right? So now let's now assume I want to remove something from the list. So if I said my list dot pop, right? So I want to remove potato. Why are we still getting this error? Let me review this error. One moment, please.
I think I don't know. I think it's the pop. Like, does pop works for string? If our list was a number, I think pop would have worked. I don't know if it was for strings.
Okay, so I think what's well, the convention for pop is okay, let me check. One moment. So can you see what happened with pop is pop does not take an argument. The mistake I was making is was giving it an argument. By default, pop removes the last item on the list. Do you get? It removes the last item on the list. So as you can see here, so now let me print the list now after removing pop. So let's see what we have. So can you see what we have now? So we now have let's add more items. Let's add more items so that we can appreciate this. So by default, pops will just remove the last item on the list. So, and another thing pop does is it removes and store in archive. So what do I mean by this? So I can say that, one moment, I can say that I'm trying to be fast. So this is why I don't want to go in details. So let me take my time and explain so that we can all understand it. So this is how pop works. So let's say I add more items. So in this case, let's say I have milk. Let's say I have milk here, right? So after milk, let's say I also have honey, right? So this is honey, right? So these are my lists. So now in this case, if I want to use pop, so pop does two things. It removes the last item on the list and keeps it. keeps it like it archives it so that if you need that item it's removed, you can always access it afterward. So in this case, I will now say that removed. So I will define a variable that I want to store what I want to remove or that I want to pop out. So I can say popped, right? So popped will now be equal to, so I want to save it inside this variable. Anything you pop out, keep it inside this variable for me. Pop should now be equal to, I'll now define my list dot pop, right? So now I will now print my list now. So I don't need all this again. So I'll now print my list. So now let's see what we have. So can you see now, if you check the list now, what do we have? We have tomato. Can you see the bottom of my screen? So we have tomato, potato, veggies, and milk. Honey is not printed. It has removed honey. Now let's now print popped that we store this. You know, I told you it's like archiving. It does not really delete it. So now let's say I now want to print popped to confirm if this is archived or otherwise. So if I now say print popped, print my list and print what you have in popped. So what do we have in pop? If you check under, we have honey, right? So which means it removed honey from the list and keep it in another variable, which you can refer to if you still need it. But if you don't need it, you can ignore it, right? So that is what pop does. So for remove, so let's say remove. Remove, it's like if you want to specify what you want to remove specifically in a list. So in this case, let's say you want to remove tomato. So I have indicated what I want to remove in this list. So I'm going to comment this popped item out. So I don't even need this one for now. So my list is equal to, okay, so let me just print it direct so that it can be fast. Okay, so let's comment these ones out. So what are we doing? We are saying that remove this tomato and print out the new list for us. We are having error. One moment. Give me a moment. So let's say that I have my lists should now be equal to where is that keyboard again? My list should now be equal to my list, right? So I'm removing tomato, right? So now let's now print my list now. So what do we have in my list now after removing tomato? Why is it none? It shouldn't be none, right? So that is giving an issue, right? So you would revisit that in a moment. So, but for remove, so this is what it does basically. So let me check it with another list. Let me check. One moment. Let me check with another list. So let's say we have a list of numbers. So if you say num, so we now give it list, right? So let's say we have 20 and we have 30, we have 50, we have 45, we have 70, right? So
Please,
this is our list. Yeah, go on, please.
Ibrahim, quick
Yes.
question. Can you
Okay.
remove can you remove with index?
With index.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
the position.
that is what remove does. So with remove, what you just state is with remove, what you just state is you just like imputes the item you want to remove as the argument. You
Okay.
understand?
So I can
Yeah, so
just
that
do remove 0 or remove 1 or remove
no.
5.
What you do
That's
is
what
you
I'm
say
asking, not string. Must it be string?
it can be string, it can be integer,
Numbers.
but you state that exact item you want to remove from the list. So in this case, if I
Okay.
want to remove 20, so I'll just say num dot remove and I will signify 20. Do you get?
Okay. All
Yes,
right.
so that's what remove does. Yeah. So it is only insert that takes two arguments. So the index position and the value you are trying to remove.
Okay.
So I'm trying to understand why this remove is throwing that error. So now let's now say in this case, I want to remove something from this number. So I will say num dot remove. So let's assume we are removing 30 from our list, right? So now print, okay, one moment. So let's say this should also work. Still getting the same thing. Okay, so I
Is it
can't
because
really
you didn't put semicolon at the end?
of where?
That's your variable.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. It's not in the syntax. It's not in the syntax. Yeah, it's not in the syntax. So I think let me check something. Let me try mine because some things, these things, it's fucks up. Let me try it on this terminal. So let's try it on terminal. Let's see our terminal. Can you see the bottom of my screen? Let's try our Python interactive mode. So I'm going on Python interactive mode now. So I'm going to define the variable saying num, right? Can you all confirm if you can see my screen? So num is, we have 20, we have
Yeah,
numbers,
I
right?
can see your screen.
Okay, so I'm using the interactive mode now. So we have 90, we have 57. It's okay. So let's add one more. So let's say 50, right? So this is it, right? But I want to remove something from this list. So I'll say num. Okay, let me say num is now equal to num dot remove, right? Then I want to remove 40, right? Then I want it to print num for me. Still the same thing. So I think something is wrong somewhere, right? So okay, so we are going to check that later. So because of time, so let's proceed. So that is that on that with list, right? So we've also checked another in our last session. So we check arrays of methods. So another method you can also check in this list is, so there's something you can also say like, okay, for instance, so as you can see it now, so we have 20, 30, 40. So let's just have all these numbers scattered. So let's say we also have 12, right? So now what happens if you want to sort this number? There's also a method for it to sort it. So we can use list.sort. If we say list.sort, right? So this allows us to sort everything. So if you see it now, we have it as 20, 30, 12, blah, blah, blah. So now let's see what we have here now. Someone drop something in the chat. What do you have in the chat? Num dot remove the numbers. Print after remove num. Num dot remove the numbers, then print after remove num. Like, are we to also spell? Okay, so I think the syntax we got wrong is, so let's say remove, right? So now after remove, we now want to state num. Okay, let's say we remove 30. So then after this, so do you mean after this, we should now say num again? So let's see, let's check the syntax.
Okay, I think the problem is none doesn't return a value. If you print none now without, if you print none dot remove, like the dot remove syntax doesn't return the value. So after declaring our list, if we have
Thank
to
you. To
the
now
remove
print our
outside,
num again.
yes.
Thank
So
you.
then the print won't be inside the non the remove won't be inside the print. It has to be on a
Thank you.
separate line.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that pointer. So yeah, so we need to now print num again to now check the new list, the new num list we have.
Yes, but then you have to still remove the first print statement. So it will just be non.remove. Yeah, yeah.
That is wrong with this. Num is equal to, you have a 20, 30, 12, 50, 45, 70. Num dot remove 30. I want to print num.
Are you sure you don't need to indent?
I quoted in syntax after remove. I don't think you put it after remove in your print.
You mean
Maybe
this?
you can try it. No, no, no. The next one under print inside.
N-
I use them after. I
For
don't know if you can try it.
num, it
Yeah,
shouldn't it shouldn't take, you
I
mean
don't know it.
quotes? It shouldn't take
Yeah, in quotes
quotes.
after remove.
It
No, no,
shouldn't take
not the
quotes.
norm. I mean in quotes
No,
after remove. Then your norm.
Let me check what you mean. After remove. No, this is just a print statement. It's just like adding what you want to display to your print outputs, right? So just like saying that I want you to tell us that this is what I remove. So that is what that one. Okay, so let's try. Let's say after remove. So this is just a print statement, I guess, right? So this is just a print statement, just to tell us what it's removing or not. So if we say num, so it's this. Wait, let's get something very interesting now. I'm coming. Sometimes this my what is it called? VS Code. It misbehaves. It misbehaves sometimes. I'm now inside Git bash now. So we'll be using Python interactive mode, right? So let's say my num is now equal to so I'm defining a list, right? So let's say we have 20, we have 60, we have oh, give me a moment, please, guys. One moment, please. Okay, so we have 20, we have 60, so we also have 70, right? Okay, let's say 40. We also have 15. So we also have 38. So let this be our list. So now in the next thing, we now want to say that print my num. Let's first see what we have here first. So let's print this and see what we have. Can you see it? So we have 20, 60, 40, 15, and 38. Now I want to say that in this my num, I want to now remove something. So I now say remove my num. Let me check with append first. Dot append. So I want to append 69 into the list, right? So now let me now print it again and see what we have. Print my num. So can we see it added 69 at the end of the list, right? So now let's use pop again. So I want to say my num. Look at what VS Code is throwing syntax error for. So we have been able to print it here. So we say my num dot pop. So I said it before. Pop will just remove the last item on the list, right? It has removed it, has shown us. So now let's now print my list now and see what we have. Print my list. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. It's ought to be my num. My num. Sorry. So can you see now? So we don't have 68 there anymore. I also introduced one method earlier that VS Code was flagging. So which is sort. So what sort does is, can you see now? We have 20, 60, 40. Now I want to arrange this to be in order, right? In ascending order. So I can say that my num dot sort. right? So now let me print my norm now and see what I have. My norm. Can you see we have it arranged now? So it arranged it according to the hierarchy. You now have 12, 15, 20, 38, and the likes, right? So now let's now test this remove again. Remove that I am having issue with VS Code. So I now say my norm dot remove. I want to remove 20 from the list, right? So I now want to print my norm now. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Do you see? This is how it works. So what Emmanuel was referring to is, so I would also demonstrate that. So it's just like print statement, like, okay, fine, no, I want you to display text to users. So like instead of just saying my norm, so I can say that print something like that's why you can use f string, like print my new list, blah blah blah, right? My new list, then my norm in curly brackets, right? So just to make it appealing, so just so that it won't just be as if we are printing. So can you see it now? You just say my new list is blah 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 blah. That is what that one does. So I think I don't know. Sometimes I have issue with VS Code, so I don't really use it as such. So but why I use it is I use it for classes so that I can have my code or my program written in like lines so that everything will be visible, then we can run it, but it misbehaves many a time. So that is that on list. So another thing I would also want to mention on list is there is also another method on list, so which is reverse. So after this reverse, we are going to we are going to move on to the next data structure. So reverse is just the opposite of sort. You know, we use sort to arrange everything chronologically, right? So with reverse, so we have 15, 38, 40. Let's see what reverse does. You can say my norm dot reverse. Now let's now print my norm now. So can we see it now? We now have 60, 40, 38, 15. So list is very interesting. It's a very interesting data structure. So you can do a lot with list, right? So without further ado, we will be moving on to tuples now. So I wouldn't really spend much time on tuples. We have a lot of things to do, and I don't really have backup as such. So hopefully this allows us to reach an extent in this session. So for tuples is very similar to lists, right? But for tuples, it's useful if you don't want to alter your data. So if you don't want to alter your data, so how do I mean? So the first thing you need to understand the syntax. So for list, we use square bracket. For tuples, we use what we know as the parentheses. So let's say, for instance, we have courses. So I want to enter my courses as tuple. So once Python sees this parentheses, it understands that I am working with tuples, right? So let's say I have history, right? So after history, I have maths, right? So let's say I also have um sorry, I also have English, right? So just add just 5. So after English, we also have let's say chemistry, right? And what else should we add? I think it is okay like this. So let's leave it as 4, right? So now if I want to print courses, I'll just say print courses. So it's very similar to so do you see what we have? History, maths, English, chemistry. Now let's now assume I want to add another course. Okay, now in this what do we call it? In this semester, I am now adding a new course to my list of courses. So this semester, I'm also doing computer science. So if you are working with tuples, let's see what happens. So I now want to add computer science to my courses. So I will say courses dot, you remember append, right? So dot append, I will now say computer. So let's say comp science, right? So now let's say comp science, right? Courses dot append comp science. Help me to add this to my tuples. So what happens? Let's see what happens if I run it. Can you see what happens? It's through an error. We have an attribute error. So the attribute error is saying that tuple object has no attribute append, right? So maybe it is only specific to append. Let's try it with another, what is it called? Another method. So let's say pop. So I want it to remove the last course on the list. So I will run it. Can you see? We also have the same error. Tuple object has no attribute pop. So essentially, for tuples, you don't like modify your data, right? So if you want a data that I don't want to modify, use tuples. If you want to manipulate, to still work, update, upgrade, and the like, so you refer to um lists. So that is that on that for list and what tuples. So without further ado, we're moving to the next data structure we should be covering today. So which is basically 1 second, please. So that should be sets. Okay, sets. So set is also very interesting data structure in Python. So what is set? So we use set basically for making the entries of our data unique. So what do I mean by unique? Unique in the sense that for sets, set does not allow duplicates. So for instance, in list, you can have duplicate items. So as we had a list of numbers here, we have 15, 38, 40. I can still repeat 40, 40, 40, 40, and the likes. But for list would not allow, for set rather, set does not allow duplicate. That is one of the characteristics of set. Another characteristics of set is set would not also allow, it is not ordered, it is unordered data structure. What do we mean by unordered data structure? We'll understand in a second. So let's first understand and appreciate the syntax for set. So for set, we can say, oh, sorry. So I want to clear the screen. Okay. Oops. So now for set, right? So let me go back to my interactive mode. So for set, so what are we working with in set? So let's say we are working with department, right? So let's say department. So we are going to define the variable which we want to assign our set of departments. Okay, so in this case, we are going to call it the variable department, right? So we call it department. So we now want to assign its values. So now for departments, right? For sets, its syntax, it's what? It's curly braces. So we call it curly braces. So as you can see on the screen, sorry, the syntax for set is what? Is curly braces. Can you see? So don't forget for list, we use square brackets. For tuples, we use parentheses. While for sets, we use curly braces. So anytime Python sees this curly braces, it understands that we are working with sets, right? So in this case, we can now say that we want to define our items. So department. So let's say we have arts, right? Okay. So I now add, after art, we have science. We also have science, right? So we also have which other department do we have? Help me, guys. Help me, guys. Um, we also have
Arts.
commercial.
Thomas.
Why are you guys leaving me all to this? We also have commercial. Okay, so commercial. We also have what?
Arts.
We had art already. Okay, now let me now introduce the feature of sets. I will now repeat art again. Can you see? I've mentioned art how many times? 2 times, right?
Twice. Yeah.
Let's now introduce one more department before we print it out and understand the idiosyncrasies or the features for sets. Okay, which other department do we have? I will put anything.
We
Which
have
one do we have
science
again?
or humanities. It's
Okay,
still hard.
thank you. Humanities. Let's use it like that. So we have humanities, right? So now let's close our curly braces brackets, right? So now let's now print department. So I would ask 2 questions after we print this out. So I would like to know what we notice in the output. So, and I would like you to please unmute and tell me. So now this is our output. So I want someone to tell me 2 things you observe in this output. If you can see my screen. Can you tell me 2 things you observe in this output, please? Very quickly, please. Very, very quickly, guys. So now look at what we defined: art, science, commercial, art, and humanities. But when I
Can I
print it out,
can I say
look at what I
something?
have. Yes, please, very quickly. Yes,
All
please.
right. So you mentioned about tuple, list, and set, and you said in sets you can add more than one variable that is the same, like you did with art. But in set, it automatically removes it because it taking only one. That's what I'm seeing there: commercial, art, science, and then humanities.
Thank you. Is that all? Is that the only observation you can highlight?
For set does not allow duplicate.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it
Okay,
doesn't allow duplicates. So another thing.
so what I observed is when we wanted to create departments, so
Okay.
it was in this order: art, science, commercial, arts, humanities.
Human.
But when
Okay.
we come out, but when it was printed, so it didn't come out in order it was created. So the order was shuffled.
Thank you so much. So this is the feature of sets. Number one, you use sets in an instance that you don't want duplicate data in your database. You don't want duplicate information. So once set sees that this thing had existed before, it removes one of them and print out it uniquely. That is one. Secondly, it is unordered data structure. If I print it out again, can you see now it is commercial art sign. Let me print it out again. It would rearrange it again. So let's say department again. It just print out as it wants. So it doesn't follow any convention. This is what we have again now. So it just print it out, right? It doesn't follow how we defined it. So that is that one thing about set. So another thing we also need to understand about set is 1 second. So it's also, we use it also to check for membership, right? We use it to check for what? Membership. So another thing we also use to check for is for similarities and differences. If you have like 2 sets variables. So how do I mean? So let me demonstrate this very quickly. So let's go back to the playhouse. So now the first thing is to check a membership, in the sense that we want to check if we have an item in a set. If we want to check if we have an item in a set, right? So we can use it. So in this case, we can say that, let me print it out now. We now say print. So we are going to use one item as an example. So I will say that art, print art in what's our variable name again? Department. So what are we asking? We are saying is art in department. So let's print it out. What do we have here? We have true, right? So now let's now try and check what we don't have in this department. So let's say we don't have cyber security, right? So now let's now say you want to print out cyber security and check we have cyber security in this. Let's see what we have here. Can you see we have false? So that is another thing set does. It is important to mention and stress that list can also do this, but this is highly optimized for sets. So set optimized this a lot. So another thing also we can do is to check if we have 2 sets, and you want to check which item is in one and it's not in order. I also want to check the common items they have in both sets. So in this case, we'll be defining 2 sets now, right? So now let's say we have course 1, right? So I'll now say my course 1 is, okay, so I mean, still have this battery is, it's not, okay, so course 1, let's say set. So I will define course 1 again. Okay, so since we have course 1 already, we have course. So let me just define another set and call it course, and call this one course 1. So we have department, right? Okay, we have department. Let's now call this one course. So for course, we are still going to repeat most of the items we have in the first variable, which is department, and add new items to it. So in that one, we have arts. We also have where's my comma? We have arts. We also have what else? We have science. So let's still put science, right? So we also have what else?
You can put cyber security now.
Thank you. Help me, guys. Help me, guys. So what else? Be thinking what I should add X after this cybersecurity. What can I add? Data science.
Can add math now.
Okay. So we also add maths, right? Okay. So now let's now add one or two of the same item we have in the first set. So let's say comma. Okay. Let's now add commercial also, and this should do. This should suffice. So let's close our sets. So now I said it that we can now use it to check for an intersection. Okay, which item exists in this and is not in this. So it is very simple. So we just use, there is a method in set that allows us to do that. So, and that method is called intersection. So how do we use the intersection? The syntax is basically, so you first tell us the sets you want to check with, right? So you now say dot intersection, right? Dot intersection. This intersection now accepts an argument. The argument will now be the other set you want to compare it with. So in this case, it's what? Cost, right? So now I want to print it out. So what do we have here? So now let's compare it ourselves. In the first department, so what are the common items we have there? This one has arts. This one also has arts. It's printed out for us, right? We have arts here. This one has commercial. This one also has commercial. We have it here. This one has science. This one also has science. It's printed out here, right? So this is another usefulness of sets to check for unique items in like um in variants or um in duplicates of sets you have in your program. So that is one. Now, how do we now check for the differences in two sets? In this set now, this one has cybersecurity. This one does not have cybersecurity. This one have data. You don't have this luxury of time to be checking it manually, right? You might have thousands of items you defined in your set. So in this case, you can also introduce the what? The difference method here. So here we just say difference. Can you see? So in this case, if you say difference, right? And you check it, what do we have here? Why is it only humanities? Do you have others in there? Or is it saying this as, wait, print department?
So I think it's checking for what is in department and not in course.
Yes,
So
yes.
the other matters like the I don't know how to put it. Okay.
Wait, let me print. So here we have humanities. It's by design, it's supposed to tell us what we have in one that we don't have in other. So what do you have in the chart? What is the difference between intersection and union? So okay, for union is to print everything out. So in this case now, so let me do that very quickly. So let's say for instance now, we have two sets already, right? So for union will allow you to print everything you have, right, in both sets. So it print it out. So in this case, you can say print department, right, dot union. We want to print everything we have in both sets. We want to check everything. So we'll pass courses. Is it course or courses? Course as arguments for this one. Can you see? It print out everything. So that is what union does. Intersection. Intersection would check for the common attributes or the common items in both sets. Union will print out everything you have in both sets. Do you get it? So that is the difference between union and intersection. But for difference, so I'm still surprised why this difference is returning only humanity. Is that the only different attribute you have in both? I don't think so.
For difference, I think if we rotate it, if you print department dot cost or difference, then you pass the department into it.
Okay,
It will print out the
we
rest.
should interchange, right? Okay,
Yeah.
let's also try that. So let's try that. So let's first check for, so let's say we want to print courses, right? In this case, course,
Yes.
right? Difference,
Yeah.
then we pass department. So let's say we pass department. So let's see what we have. Oh, thank you. So can you see it now? So in this case, when we like do it reversely, so it's printed out the differences. So if we check our department, we don't have data science, but we have data science in course. So we don't also have cybersecurity. In this one, we have this, we don't have this. So that is what those methods perform basically in what sets as a data structure. Any question, guys, before you proceed? So we still have a lot to cover. We are still going to check dictionaries. We are still going to check modules, packages, libraries, and variable scopes in Python. So please let me know if there is any question. You can drop in the chat or you unmute and ask, please, before you proceed. Okay, I guess we are all good, right? So in absence of any question, so we are going to be moving on to another data structure, which you will be wrapping up data structure discourse this evening or afternoon, depending on where you are on this planet. So here we have dictionaries, right? So dictionary is also a very useful data structure that will be working with majorly while you are like writing a software, right, as a Pythonista, right? So now, how do you now work with dictionaries? How do you feel comfortable with dictionaries? It is very simple. It is by understanding the syntax. Many people like they dread dictionary, and dictionary is not like really difficult as such from other data structures, just that it has like more extensive syntax unlike others, right? So we're going to learn this syntax now. So, but before we delve into the syntax, so let's first understand what dictionary is. So it is like simulated after the popular dictionary we all know. So we know by definition, dictionary simply means to search, look up for the meaning of a word, right? That is what dictionary mean. You would all agree with me, right? So now also in this case, it is just like an analogy or like a representation of what dictionary mean. But in this case, we use two terminologies, which are key and value. In this case, key is representing the word in a dictionary. Okay, fine. I want to look for the meaning of tuples in dictionary. So that word is the key here in programming, right? Now, while the meaning is the value, if you check tuple, dictionary will tell you tuple mean blah, 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 blah. In this case also, now I have key. What does this key mean? What information do I have in a key? That is what value would also what keep or show us or display for us. Do we get the concept, guys? Before we proceed, we need to understand the concept of dictionary. When we say key value pair, what it simply means is we have what? A word and the meaning. However, in this case, it is used as a key and the value. A key and what it is keeping for us as it was as an information. So that is what it does basically. It is very similar to our understanding of dictionary. So it's going to make sense more in a second. So let me clear this first. So let's go back to our interactive mode. Okay, so now we all need to understand the syntax for dictionary, right? So it also takes a variable. So as we all know, we can't do without variable in what? In programming. So now let's now say we have a variable of students. So basically one of the use cases for dictionary is if you want to store like an information, like more information about specific objects or specific individuals. So in this case, let's say we have students. So students have like their metadata, right? So let's say student has a name, student has a phone number, student has a class, student has department and the likes, right? So now how do we now store all this information and have it like in and have everything in order, or and have everything stored in a place, right? That we can always reference, we can always update, or we can always manipulate, right? So that is where dictionary now comes in handy. So now the syntax for dictionary, it's almost similar to that of set. It also uses the curly braces, right? The curly braces. However, what differentiates dictionary from sets, and what makes Python understand or tell apart amongst them, is for dictionary, you have key and pairs. For sets, you just define your items like blank. So now in this case, nicely now I want to take information for this student. So you first say name, right? So let's say name. Let's take note of this syntax, please. So we say name and colon. In this case, which name are we using? Let me check for one name in the chart. So let's say, okay, I have on this list Aziza. Okay, so we say name, we say Aziza, right? Aziza, right? So this is the name we have here, right? So name is not the only value we want, right? So now in this case, name is the key. Why Aziza is the value? Name is the key, Aziza in the value. It will all make sense in a minute, right? When we start to query this dictionary, it will all make sense. So name is Aziza, and we also want to have another thing. So let's say department, right? So Aziza is in what department? So we can say department. Let's first say status. Is she a staff or a student? So status, we can say she is a what? She's a student, right? So she's a student, right? So we say comma. So she's in what department, right? So we can also say deep EPT to represent department. So we can say she's in a colon again. She's a software engineer, right? So you can say soft ENG, right? So she's in software engineering department, right? Studying software engineering. So let's say our age also, so that we can also understand that it does not take only strings, it takes mix of data types. So in this case, we say our age is 30, right? Sorry about that, Ziza. So our age is 30, that is what comes to my head. So we say our age is 30, right? So now let's stop at this for now. So we've defined our what's our database for Aziza using dictionary. Now in this case, let me now say I want to now go and check for all the information of Aziza. Maybe she is working on a project or something. So I want to check. Okay, let's also add score. Let's also add score so I can have two integers. So she's working on her project, right? So let's say she scored 80, right? So her score is 80. So in this case, our score is 80. So now I want to print all our profile. So like as you check sometimes if we are perusing or navigating an application or any software, right? So you now want to check the profile. So now let's now print it out. So if we now print students, so let's say we print students. So what do we have here? Can we see it now? So we have name, Aziza. We have status, she's a student. We have department, she's in software engineering. We have age 30, we have score 80, right? So now, in this case, what if now this is where it now makes sense. This is where it's got its coinage dictionary. Now, in this case, I don't need all this information. Aziza could have limitless or numbers or scores of data, right? Metadata, right? But in this case, I just want to check only our score. I don't care of other information. I just want to check only our words, only our score. So this is what we now introduce us to the methods of dictionary. How do we query dictionary? Methods of dictionary. So in this case, we cannot say what. So help us to now print. Help us to print students dot get, right? I'm going to explain this method after this usage, right? So we're supposed to print student.get. We are now going to use the key to search for the value in this case. That is what get takes. We use the key to search for the value. So we want to check for score, right? So I now say score. So what does she score? I don't care about others. Oh, sorry, I didn't close the parentheses. Oh, okay. So I hope it's allowed. Okay, let me define it again. So we have it here. So we now say print student dot get. In this case, you want to check for what again? For our score, right? This syntax is very important. Can you see what it's printed out? Can you see, guys? So when I printed student dot get, so I want to check for our score. It printed out 80. It's just like going into the dictionary, look up a word to find its meaning. So that is where it got its names from, dictionary, right? So I used score to query the list of database I have for Aziza, right? To get her score. So I also want to check to know if she's a student or a staff. So I'll also use this get again. So I will now check here. So in this case, who can tell me? I want to know if she is a student or a staff. So what do I use to query this database to give me that status? Is it key or value? What do I use in this case? Can anyone tell me, please? I want to check if she's a student or a staff. So what do I use to query this? Am I using the key or the value? Anyone?
We're
I
using
think key.
Thank you. I'm using the key. So in this case, it is what? Status, right? So if I now say status, so I want to get the status. So what happens? It tells me that she is a what? She's a student, right? So we can also have lists. We can also have lists in this dictionary. So I'm going to introduce that very quickly when we get to how to add more items to our dictionary, right? So when I introduce the method I will use to do that. So I'm going to introduce that in a second. However, let's now assume we want to check for a data that we do not have in this dictionary. In this case, we don't have if she's a male or female, right? We don't have sex in it. So now let's now search for sex. What do we have here? It has what? It has none. Can you see? It's printed out what? None, because none is not what defined in our dictionary. Sex is not defined in our what dictionary. So it's printed out none. However, this gets takes another optional argument. It takes another optional argument. So this optional argument is to now customize what the output should be if an item is not found in a dictionary. So here it takes it takes the key you are searching for and the output you would want if an item is not found. So in this case, I don't want it to print by default. It uses none by default, but I don't want none. I want to customize what I want. So I will now say, in this case, okay, if you don't find sex, maybe she's a male or female, just say that not found. Right? So now let's print and see what we have now. We don't have it in the dictionary. So let's print it out and see what we have. Can you see what we now have now? So we now have not found. So you can now customize this to what you want according to the requirements of the project or the program you are working on. It could be blah, 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 blah. It is not defined in this. If you want it, you can, so, and the likes, right? So that is what get does, basically. So now, after get, I will now introduce another method commonly used with dictionary. So, which is what? Updates, right? It is what? Updates. So this update is used to add new items to our what? To our dictionary. Again, updates can be used to add new items to our what? To our dictionary. Now let's now say that she doesn't have phone number, right? She doesn't have phone number. Then I want to add phone number to the dictionary now. I want to add a phone number to the dictionary that we have here. So I will now say that I can say student. So let's just be very quick, right? I'll be very fast now, please. So let's be very quick. So you can say print student dot So in this case, you would now say updates, right? So updates. So updates will now take the new item as the what? As the dictionary. So you now say what? This is the syntax for using updates. So inside it, you now define the curly brackets for the new item you want to add. But now you want to add what? Phone, right? So we're adding phone. So let's say our phone is 234 blah 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 blah, right? So this is the phone number we're adding for our, right? So now let's now see our new. Oops, I didn't close it again. Okay, so to throw an error. So let me just run it all over again. So now let's print our new. Let me print the new student now. Do you see we now have phone there now? Can you see? Can you see, guys? We now have what now? We now have phone in our list. What did we use to add phone? We use the update method. So this update method does two things. One is to either update an existing data in our database. For example, now, let me bring out back the method. So I want to change the name from Aziza to someone else. So I can just say that student.update. So I'll now say name. So in this case, I don't want, maybe she changed her name, right? So she changed her name to something else. So I now want to update it in my database. So in this case, I will now say, so I'll say Enyo. So in this case, so I will now update the name to Enyo. So if I now say Enyo now, Enyo, right? So if I say Enyo, if I now run it and print the new update we have here, let's see what happens. So now let's now print our student again. Can you see what name we have here now? From Aziza, we now have what? NU. So basically, update does two things. One, it is to append new dictionary, new key value pair into our dictionary, inside our dictionary, or to update an existing key value pair inside our dictionary. So that is that for updates. So another thing, another important and interesting method we also need to be familiar with while working with dictionary is the key method. So for instance now, okay, fine. Okay, I just want to know all the keys I have in this dictionary. I don't care about the values for now. I just want to check for only the keys. So it is not far-fetched. So you can just come here and just change this update. So in this case, we just say student.key. If you have any question, please let me know. If I'm too fast, please let me know so I can know how to slow down a bit. Or if you still feel you are lost, please signify so that we can do a quick recap before we proceed, before we go too far. So okay, fine. So I don't want to print only the keys. What happened? Student.key. So this case, I want to print the keys. So I'll say print student dot. One moment, let me print student first. Okay, so I have my students, but now I just want to print out just the keys. So the keys are in this case what? We have names, we have status, we have what else do you have here? We have the departments, right? So, but this case, I just want to print out the keys. So you can say print student dot key. Okay, dictionary of has no attribute key. Oh, sorry, keys. Sorry, keys. So now, as you can see it here now, so we now have the dictionary keys. So as we have it here, so let me scroll up. Can I scroll up? So we have dictionary. If you see here, we have dictionary what? Dictionary keys. What's in the chart? Would the student status be printed by default if student status is used? if student, will the student status be printed by default? If print student, I don't really get this question. I will come back to it in a moment, please. I'm already running out of backup. So so as you can see here, so it printed out just the keys here. If you see, we have name, so it doesn't print out the value, right? So that is what key does. So now let's now say you want to print out the values, just the values alone. So you can also do that. So let me clear my screen. This is why I would have loved to use VS Code, but it's disappointed us. So once I go out of this, we need to be redefining all this dictionary again. So please, let's just bear with me, guys. So if you can still see the screen, so I'm currently working at the bottom. So I just want to print just the value. So we have printed the keys, right? So this time you want to print the value. So you can say print student dot. It's also very simple. So you just save values. So in this case, I want to check all other metadata for these students we have here. So if we print this out, so can you see what we have here? So it does not come with key and value pair. It just printed just the NU, which is the name, student, software engineering, 3080, and the phone number, right? So that is how to do that. Now, if you want to print out everything, in this case, you want to print out both the key and the value pair. So it's also not far-fetched. So you just say what? So we use the method student.items. So that is items in this case. Use the method items. So can you see now? So can you see how everything is being printed out like beautifully? So we now have everything like we have in between our dictionary, we have like a tuple kind of structure. So which is what encompassing each key value here into like what into a parenthesis. So we have name, NU, status, student, department, software engineering, age 30, score 80, phone number, blah blah blah. So that is that on that. So one more thing, the last thing I will be checking on dictionary before I move on is how to iterate on dictionary, using dictionary, iterating using dictionary. Dictionary is very iterable. So, and it is always most time confusing, right? We don't get the syntax right. So how to use your loop while working with dictionary. So many time, maybe you just want to use, if you don't want to use all these methods we are using, like these key values, maybe you just want to use an iteration to print out all the keys you have. We want to use an iteration to print out all the values you have. We want to use an iteration to print out both key and the value pair. So we have a way of doing that using what iteration in dictionary. So let me revisit this question before I proceed with that. Would the student status be printed by default? Yeah, good evening. Any question? Any question, please?
No, I'm just joining. No, I'm just joining.
Oh, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Yeah, you're welcome, Clement. You're welcome. And would the student status be printed by default if print status is used? I don't really understand. Can you unmute and give this in more context, Emmanuel, please? If print student status is nope, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. So to print, okay, if student status is used. No. You need to follow the syntax or this convention. If you are trying to print out just a value, right? So you just use the student dots values, right? So, but if you are trying to get for a specific value in that dictionary that we have, you're trying to get for a specific dictionary in the dictionary we have. So if you are checking for a specific, it will not clear until I exit. And if I exit, I will lose this data we are working with. So let me just copy it and exit so that we can start from the beginning. 1 second, please. Don't even know if this one will copy. So working with Python interactive mode can be very, very boring, but it's still much more reliable for me than VS Code. So and it's actually very good. Like it makes one very proficient with understanding syntax, and with it makes you very good with indenting. So let me exit this and clear the screen. Okay, so let's go back to Python. So let's just use the same variable, the same dictionary we are working with. But this time we are just like we are defining it newly. So now if what happened? Students name indentation error, expected indent, where student is equal to name, status, department, blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe I added space or something. Let me check. Okay, I added space. So, okay, I'm redefining it again. So yeah, we are defining it as this, right? So now, if this is what Emmanuel means, so now let's now say we want to get just the just a value for a specific key in our dictionary database. So as I have stressed earlier, so you just do student dot get, right? So in this case, it takes one compulsory or mandatory argument and one optional argument. So that optional argument is to customize your output in a case whereby the key you are searching for or the value you are searching for is not defined in your dictionary. So by default, it returns none, but you can customize this as the case may be. But I want to check for just name, right? I want to search for the name of the student that has this data or this information, right? So if I say student.get, so I now say name. What is happening? Name is not defined. Oh, sorry, not in parentheses. So can you see it print out Aziza, right? However, let me search for something that is not on this list. Now we don't have phone. So we have lost the data where we defined phone. So what happens? It print out none, but I don't want it to print out none. I want it to customize the output here. So I want it to print out something else. So I can say that just print out not defined or something, anything as the case may be. So now let me print it out and see what we have. Can you see? So not defined. So again, for a recap, so for the sake of those that are just joining, so we've been able to check through lists, tuples, sets. So this recording of this session will be available so that we can always reference it at our convenience. So on dictionary, we've introduced what key value pair is. We've also simulated it with the common dictionary we are all familiar with, right? That we can all relate with. So we understand and appreciate trying to compare the key value pair in programming dictionary with real life dictionary, right? Which is word and their meaning, right? So they are very similar in use. So also, we also check how to define, we understand the syntax now. It accepts all data types, be it integer, string, it can also accept lists and the likes as the case may be. So we now check how to get items in our dictionary. Either you want to get just specific value for a key, or you want to get all the keys in your dictionary, getting all the values in your dictionary, and getting both key and value pair in your dictionary. So now, having said this, right? So now let's now assume we want to iterate this dictionary. I don't want to use the previous method I introduced. So I want to use iteration. I want to use for loop. So in this case, I will say for, I want to print only the key. I'll say for key in students, right? For key in students, print key. Let's see what we have here. Can you see what we have here? For key in students, print key. So it printed out all the key in the dictionary. So in this case, we have name, status, department, age, and score. I want to print out the value. So I'll just say the same thing basically. So for value, right, in students, so print out value for me. Print value. So what do we have here? Oh, sorry. So in this case, we can say for key value. So this is what it takes for key value. For key value in students, dots, don't forget this, dots item. So it allows you to print everything you have in the dictionary. For key value, what I did earlier was it's a common mistake trying to print out value in a dictionary. However, this is the correct syntax. So it takes for key value in student dots, you now use that items method. Items. Now, what are we now printing? Print, in this case, you now specify key, print out key, and what? And value. So can you see it now? So it's now like it's the output, it's kind of pleasant to an extent, right? This is blocking the screen. I don't know if I can move it away. Okay. So can we see it now? So we have name, Aziza, we have status student, we have department, software engineering, we have, so these are one of the most common use cases trying to like print out, like if you check your profile on a software, on an application, so that you can see everything stored for you. So this is that on that in respect to dictionaries. Any questions, guys, before you proceed? Oh, any questions, please, very quickly. Okay, so this can just one gory thing about this is even at 80 it can shut down. So that's just my fear. Okay, so any questions, please, before we proceed? Let me check the charts. Okay, in absence of question, I feel we are all good. So, and if there is any question, please, because of time, so since there will be recording of this session, so we can always refer to it afterward, so that we can always have answers to our inquiries, right? And you can always reach out anytime if you have any doubts or any inquiry in these topics we have covered so far. So that is that on data structure. So as I have now mentioned that in this session, we are also going to be extending into what else do I have on the list? Into modules, packages, and libraries, right? So these are also very interesting and very sweet concepts in Python, right? So modules. So now let's now proceed with modules. So I'm not too sure if we are going to cover everything because of time. So, and I would also like to create awareness. This can just throw me out any moment. So I will try as much as possible to be as fast as I can so that I just hopefully I'm able to save this recording. So with modules, so what are modules in Python, right? What are modules in Python? Again, I would like to reiterate, before you can understand modules, you need to appreciate what function is. If you are still having issues with function, please refer to one of our immediate past PLDs or sessions we had. So I extensively elaborate on functions. So understanding the concepts of function would make you appreciate what module is. So module basically, it's just a fancy word, I would say. In my own term, it's just a fancy word. Module is just like a file, right? It's just a file in Python. So let's see it, begin to see module as a file. So, and it's become approachable and it's become less scary when you are working with it or when you hear the name modules. So, but what it does essentially is, what are Python modules? So Python modules are just basically Python file with .py extension. Again, Python module are just basically Python file with .py extension. However, why do we use modules? We use modules for three common reasons. We use modules for three common reasons. So one of these reasons is it provides like flexibility to organize our code in a logical way. So we are going to see that in a minute, if time permits, if the backup permits rather. So we're going to see that in a minute. So it just allows us to arrange or organize our code in what's in an organized or in a structured pattern. So that is why we need module, basically. So another thing module also does is it also enable reusability of code. So I mentioned this emphatically when we had session on functions. So it is very similar to function, right? So function basically is just to define, like just to have like a template that you don't need to disturb yourself when you need it subsequently. So you just go and grab what you've defined earlier, right? So it is the same with modules. So it allows us to reuse our code that we've defined earlier. So you don't need to be having time, you don't need to be wasting time redefining lines of code, right? So that's another thing module does. So another thing module also does, it helps in debugging code easily. So in what do I mean by helping to debug code easily? In a case whereby you are working with modules, right? So which we are going to see in a second. So you are working with modules. So while working with modules, right? Let me see if this thing can still boost it a bit. before it switches off. So while working with modules, right? So you call functions from other modules, from other Python files. So when you call on this function, let's now say, for instance, when you, after calling that function, it's returned an error. When it's returned an error, so you quickly have a snapshot or have an idea of where the error is coming from and go straight to that function you called and correct or debug that error. You don't need to waste much time on like reviewing thousands of lines of codes before identifying or single-handedly handling an error causing blockage for you while working with a function. So this would also make sense in a minute, right? So now the most important thing is now how to use modules, different ways of using modules in Python. So which is basically importing Python modules. So let's go to the playhouse. So this time, I think this will be very handy. So let me just close and open it again and see if it can be rebooted now. So I'm going to open the VS Code again. So because this module will only make sense using VS Code. So one moment, please, while this come up. So while we are waiting for it, please, if you have any question, please let me know. So again, I would like to reiterate. So module is just basic Python file with .py extension, right? So it's no more, no less. So let me just brush through this very quickly so that we can the system would shut down like any minutes. You can just shut down. So
I hope the meeting will be able to record and to save other.
I'm also afraid, to be honest. I'm afraid. So because even if it shuts down, if it interrupts, I don't know if by default it saves. Who has an idea with Zoom? So does it like auto save when you lost a session? Anyone with idea?
Make we add ChatGPT right now.
Yeah, come on, someone can check. Someone should check, please, while I'm checking this. So I'll be very fast. So what is all this? So I'll just be very fast. So I think we are going to be doing a deep dive session separately on this module. So I'll just give like an overview of what it does before all this like interrupts. So now let's now say, so with modules, so the first thing we need to know is we need to know how to work with our files, right? So just basically working with files. So now let's now say Visual Studio Code, there was an error while opening. Yeah, don't worry. Okay, thank you. So let's say I have a file. So let me create a file very quickly that will be working with mkdir module. Okay, what do you have in the chat? Are you recording to your device? To the cloud, Emmanuel, to the cloud. Yeah, to the cloud. I'm recording to the cloud. Okay, so mkdir module. So I want to call this module py, module Python, and as soon as you create this, I want you to open it straight because I don't have time. So module underscore py. So we are now in our module Python this thing now. So now the first thing you need to do is now let's now say that I now have a file. So I use VI. So if you are not familiar with VI, so it's a text editor. So that's what I use basically. So I now want to create a file, right? So I want to create this file. I want to call it a VI calculation, or let me say arithmetic.py. So I'll just be very fast. So this is how I will define all my function that I want to work with in order for us to appreciate and understand how module communicates amongst files. Just like that's like building communication amongst files you have in the same directory, right? So that for instance now, if I define a function in a specific module, in this case, if I say module, I mean file. If I define a function in a specific Python module, if I go and open another Python module, I can simply call any function, any class, or any variable inside the other module that I have defined my function in. So that's essentially what it means. So I can say def add. So let me be very fast. So I'm going to just use add. I'll use the basic arithmetic so that we can be fast. So def add AB. Okay. Please give me a second, please. Give me a moment, please. Just one moment, please. A moment, please, guys. One moment, please. So even my router is about to shut down. So I have a flat, the UPS is already blinking. So I'll suggest we just call it a wrap for this session. So we'll be continuing from module in our subsequent session rather. So I will schedule maybe most likely on Monday, right? So we need to learn a lot. It's not even a topic we need to rush into, because if you don't understand module, we can't appreciate libraries, we can't appreciate packages, and also function scopes. So we need to appreciate this is like a basic for other concepts. So I would schedule a session for Monday. So we would start from module before we now kickstart or embark on next week's content. So most likely our next week's content we begin PLD for it on Wednesday. So let me just save this recording first. So basically we've been able to check the data structure. So starting from checking from lists, we reviewed lists, we deep dived sets, we deep dived tuples, we also deep dived dictionary. So we've checked all this. I believe to an extent we can now appreciate their conceptual framework, the syntaxes and the rationale and the logic of using them to a very great extent, right? So we are going to continue from here on Monday. So I'll schedule another session tomorrow. So most likely in the evening. So we would start from modules. So we would cover module, packages, libraries, and function scope. So all these are very important. So they are like building block for before we now move into class. So which I believe would be like a content for next week. So thank you all guys. So if you have any question before this shuts down, please let me know. So I'm going to stop recording now.